Hello, horror fans. Pete here from the Lasser Cast, and I am with my co-host with the most, the male witchmaker over there, Dr. Zayas God. Danny, are you ready to talk about Mayfair Witches Episode 2 on AMC?
Yes, I am.
So, okay, first off the bat, I'm just going to ask you, like last week we said multiple times, oh man, I can't wait until the next episode or the future of the show because then it's going to really start to get good. Do you think that that's an accurate statement?
I think there's a lot of potential. I think this episode was better than the first one.
Mm-hmm.
There were some things that I think were supposed to be very dramatic that I kind of was laughing at.
Uh-huh.
And I still think it's taking too long to introduce who some of these characters are. And what I will say is I loved the way this episode ended.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the best part of this episode was the last scene of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you're supposed to leave them hanging in old fashioned, wait till next week, episodic TV, not in the, binge culture of like a Netflix where they'll dump, all 10 episodes of a show right away uh, with this show, being that it's on AMC, it's still kind of like that old fashioned, gotta, if you like it, come back in a week, talk about it and come back in a week. And I thought they really did a good job of that in this episode with the way the episode ended.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, snap. Okay. Because it was something that they had built up to for the entire episode. And you're kind of expecting something to happen. And then something else happens and you're like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, I did kind of like that. I had a very long weekend. I slept in 3 different spots over the last 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah, so each of the last 3 days I've slept in a different place. So I was very tired, and we finally came home this afternoon, and it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, all right, we're gonna record at 5, so I'm gonna go in my room. I'm gonna throw on Mayfair Witches. It took me about 2 hours to get through this episode. I think I fell asleep like 5, 6 different times.
Oh, Jesus.
And I don't want to blame the show necessarily because I it's just been one of those weekends. We did like a Girl Scout thing where we slept in a mall in Long Island, and basically we just had a mall filled with Girl Scouts going crazy all night. So we had a
Okay.
terrible night's sleep on Friday. We came home Saturday. Last night, Athena and I went away for our anniversary.
Oh.
Better night's sleep. But yeah, I needed like laying down in the dark to watch this show after a wild weekend. I don't think did the show justice
Yes.
because I kept waking up going, wait, I definitely missed something. It ended
Yes.
up taking me well over an hour, probably close to 2 hours to watch this uh, 1 hour episode of TV with commercials also. So probably 46-minute episode of TV.
Yeah, so you like would wake up and you'd be like, okay, is Annabeth Gish like having sex with some dude? Wasn't she in a coma? And then wait,
Yeah.
and now
It,
Rosario Daddario is like,
is Alexandra Daddario
oh,
having an orgasm on an airplane right
yeah.
now?
I
Like
don't know why
what's
the fuck I keep calling her Rosario Daddario. I don't know what that. I mean, it doesn't even sound good. Alexandra Daddario. Duh. What the fuck? Yeah, look, here's the thing, man. I flew through this episode because I had a little bit of downtime after I watched Pearl for the first time last night. By the way, that leads up to our recording tomorrow, of which Danny and I are going to be recording our top 10 horror movies. Oh, look at this. The guy's got the freaking DVD right there.
so
Our top
so I was in a Walmart at 7 a.m. Saturday
yeah,
morning because they kicked us out of said mall in Long Island at 6:30.
sure,
So
sure.
I was like, all right, the only place that's ever going to be open is Walmart. So I felt like I was back in college, like going to Walmart at all times of the day. And
Yeah.
I just happened to pass by, and Pearl on DVD. I think it's actually a DVD. It's not even a Blu-ray.
Nice.
Jesus. Oh
Well,
my God. Why not the VHS? But yeah, it was on sale, and I have X at home. I actually won X at a horror trivia night, so now I have both of them. So my goal
nice.
for tonight is to actually rewatch Pearl tonight for said top 10 list that we're recording tomorrow. Just to give
Yes.
you and viewers a quick note, these are, and I posted this to my social media. I've then had to add a few more at the bottom. These are the 74 2022 horror movies that I watched.
Yeah.
So me trying to come up with a top 10 and rank said top 10 in order is like it's really freaking hard. I'm like really struggling. And I was like, all right, let me circle the movies that I might put on my top 10. And the circles are up to about 22.
Oh, Jesus
Now I have
Christ.
to whittle off 10 movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Find out if Danny and I have a bunch of movies in common. I say it's probably about 50-50. I think there's probably half that we both agree on and half that we're very divided on. But that is a video that's coming out later in this week. For now, going back to Mayfair Witches, I would say that for me, I like this episode better than the first episode. It's mainly because it didn't have some of the things I really didn't like about the first episode. The first episode, I was not a fan of Rowan's mother when she was like a teenager or young adult. And that whole sequence where she goes to the party and she gets impregnated by that guy that's wearing like a cat mask. I just didn't really care for that actress too much. And I didn't really like that sequence. Luckily, that's completely gone from this episode. We just have Annabeth Gish as her mother. It's in the present day. She's running around. One thing I did not like about both episodes is that Annabeth Gish has these very like striking contacts on. I'm not sure like in the book if there's like this description of her like piercing blue eyes or her unnatural eyes. I don't think I remember that from the very little I listened to, but her eyes look so fake to the point where it kind of takes me out of it, you know?
yeah, I at first I thought that there was something that where she gets like possessed by Lasher, that it like puts the contact in like to show that she's being possessed. But then the rest of the episode, and like, you know, you even said it last time, Alexandra Daddario, gorgeous woman. Like, you know, we keep her eyes are literally staring at us because of the background, and she has these striking blue eyes. Like that's like one of her trademarks as an actress is just her incredibly colorful eyes. And so maybe they're like they're doing that with Annabeth Gish, who's playing, you know, Deidre is her mother. So maybe they want them to like share that similarity. And yeah, it does kind of feel a little. My biggest issues with the show are there are some characters that I see. Lestat on Interview with a Vampire, Sam Reed, he did a lot of hamming it up. He did a lot of overacting. He did a lot of you know, loud, boisterous acting. But that character demands that you do that. Like, you know, I always think about one of the great like turned up to 11 performances I've ever seen in a movie was Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And there are parts of that movie at the end where he is just screaming, and you're just like, this is so great because he's so into it. And it's like, of course he's screaming like a maniac. He's playing the devil. Like, it's Al Pacino and he's playing the devil. Like, if he tried to tone it down, it just wouldn't work.
Right.
So there is a place for over the top, great, you know, eccentric acting.
Yes.
I don't think there have been those spots on this show. And I feel that some of the acting is just in some spots Like, I don't know what Harry Hamlin is doing as Cortland Mayfair. I don't know. Like, the movie is set in present day,
Right.
but his acting makes him seem like he's like a late 18th century or early 19th century, vicar of the times. And I'm just like, is this really how they're asking him to do his line reads? Because, Harry Hamlin is not a terrible actor. It just feels like I don't know what he's doing in this particular part. And, Jack Houston is barely in the show. He kind of like flashes in and flashes out, but all of his lines, he feels like every line is like this. And you're kind of like, wait. And like you said, like the context take you out of it. To me, some of the acting choices are taking me out of what should be drama, what should be, horror, and building up to obviously this powerful group of witches and other beings, and it's just kind of taken me out of it for now. I do agree with you that this was a better episode than the first one, and I really liked the ending of it. I thought Alexandra Daddario was better in this episode when she wasn't on an airplane, and but I also like that they officially moved the setting of the show to New Orleans, and the show finally, after that first episode kind of hinting at it, the show definitely had more of a New Orleans vibe to it. Some of the hotels they're in and the hallway designs, I'm like, okay, now I feel like I'm home in New Orleans. So yeah, I do think it's gonna have to start, getting right into the actual witch stuff pretty soon for it to maintain my interest.
Yeah. Well, to go along with what you're saying about the acting, I don't want to discredit Alexandra Daddario, but when she's more subdued, that's when she works. I've said this last episode. She's on the show White Lotus, the first season, and she's a very straight man or straight woman character on that show, kind of responding to over the top rich people on that show. And so she doesn't have to overact or be super emotional on that show. She has a couple of moments, but she's very much just reacting to everyone around her. On this show, however, she's confronting people. She's being confronted by a counselor at one point, by the guy Cisprin. I can never say his fucking name the right way.
Cyprian,
there we go. They interact for the first time in this episode, and every time that she interacts with someone, it's this sort of over-the-top emotional thing. With the counselor, it's like, oh my God, you don't know me. What are you doing? And then when she runs into Cyprian, she says, who are you? Why are you chasing after me? And she runs away from him. Then she has an orgasm on the plane. And at the very end, she meets her mom. And spoilers for this episode, her mother's throat is slashed by the time she meets her in an elevator. And I thought that her reaction, even though she is meeting her biological mother and her biological mother's throat is slashed, it was still over the top, to which it seemed like it was fake. You know what I'm saying? Whoever's directing the episode, which I wish I'd written down their name, it would have been great if they went for just more of a stunned response versus this sort of screaming over the top response. You know what I'm saying? Or if you're going to do the screaming thing, make it this hysterical, crazed look versus this weird thing that she did at the very end. It just, the choices that they're making with the emotional reactions, it's too dramatic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I liked when the elevator door opens, and she realizes who the woman is that's standing there.
Yeah.
And she has this look of oh my God, tears, I'm fine, the serendipitous moment to finally meet my birth mother in the elevator. Here she is. Yeah. And then you just start to see the blood trickling down.
Right.
And I thought that was such a good scene. And then it kind of ends with her screaming in the elevator. And I'm like, I get it. That's horrific. But this is also a character who when she checks into the hotel, they're like, oh, Miss Fielding, and she's like, Dr. Fielding.
Right.
So it's like you're so quick to like, I'm a doctor.
Right.
Like, what? Now all I'm thinking is James A. Janice's kill counts for Saw when they just kept playing Dr. Lawrence Gordon going, I'm a doctor.
Right.
Not to bring up other YouTube channels, but like she's so quick. Like this guy's just like, yes, hi, Miss Fielding, I have you here, Dr. Fielding.
Right.
So then it's like she sees her mother, she's like tearing up. Oh my God, this is amazing. What throat is slit, and she's just sitting there screaming instead of being a doctor.
Right.
And they also make the big deal of the fact that like her mother died, her adopted mother died, and she went right back to work and went right back into surgery. They made that point earlier in the episode.
Right.
So it's like, this is a woman who just suffered a terrible, grief in her life and went back to work and did surgeries.
Right.
And then she basically encounters, yes, it is her birth mother, but a stranger in an elevator whose throat is slit, and she just starts screaming for help, which goes pretty much against everything we've learned about this character so far. Now, not to say that she was going to save the mother's life, but it just felt very counterproductive to everything they've done to establish this character for nearly 2 full episodes.
Totally agree.
And now I kind of feel like, are they going to give her witch powers? And is she basically just going to throw away like the whole are they going to like use the fact that she's a witch? Is that going to be like, you were a good doctor, you were an expert surgeon because you're a witch? Which I feel like doesn't do much for the, I am woman vibe that she's giving off. So I really hope they don't just lose that entire part of the character and like basically say she's only talented, she's only reached these levels in her field because of her superpowers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think that the route they're going is that the power is like causing chaos in her life, and it's making her dangerous, and it's making her a killer where she's usually a savior. And it was kind of funny because, first of all, the doctor that she gave the aneurysm to in the first episode, he's back, and he's condescending once again. And, luckily she doesn't give him an aneurysm again. But then when she goes to meet the counselor, the counselor starts to get a headache too. And then blood starts to drip down her nose. I'm like, oh my God, is she going to kill this woman too? I thought it was like a little too much. But luckily she left, realizing that her power could have potentially hurt that counselor. We see the same thing every time that Rowan starts to get frustrated. We see this sort of tunnel, looks like a very small kind of cave that like an animal would go through. And then it usually goes into someone's like neural pathways or their veins in their skull. And in this case, she looks up at one point when she's leaving, like I think it's the doctor's office, and she looks up and she sees a bunch of ravens who had shit on her car, and she like goes into the mind of one of the ravens and makes one of the ravens have an aneurysm too.
Yeah,
so,
she murders a bunch of birds.
Yes, and then she goes and buries the bird at the beach. And then falls asleep next to the buried bird. It's kind of goofy.
And then wakes up and there's like a beach party going on.
Right, and they're listening to metal, which I don't know who's listening to metal. That was
one of the main...
Good.
Am I listening to metal? What?
No. They were listening to metal at the beach. I was like that. I like metal, but I don't think...
Because she fell asleep on like a beach where there was nobody, and a group of like people decided we're gonna have a nighttime beach party right in front of this person who's passed out. Like, did they check to see she wasn't dead? Maybe it's like some like strung out homeless person who's like OD'd and their body is rotting on the beach. Seems like a good place to settle down and plant our beach chairs, lay out the blanket.
Yeah, and listen to some metal. I know. There's some really silly kind of choices that they make in this show. And, I'll keep watching it. Like I said, it was better than the previous episode, but mainly because, like, I don't think she actually does have a "I am woman" kind of hear me roar speech in this episode, right? She does kind of go off against Cyprian, and she goes off against the counselor, but it's more because they're kind of prying into her life versus saying that she's incompetent. The doctor does say this one line to her. It's something so ridiculous too. It's like, she says, "I've been back since my mom died, and I can do my job." And he's like, "Oh well, your patients have been under anesthesia longer now." And it's like, what the fuck? It seemed like such a stupid thing to critique her about. You know? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
well, you said you were falling asleep a bunch of times, so maybe.
like I was all thrown off time wise. Like I
Yeah.
went back and I totally missed the sex scene between Lasher and Annabeth Gish. So
Oh.
that scene must have played in my bedroom, and then I rewound, fell asleep again, rewound. So they must have thought I was watching some real inappropriate stuff because.
Yeah. Well, did they think?
Wait,
Did they?
what? You did? Oh, Athena just said she thought I was watching
Porn.
inappropriate television because I must have watched the Annabeth Gish Lasher sex scene 3 times, but have fell asleep before it happened twice.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it for the 3rd time, going, really, this is what's going on in this episode? And then,
Yeah.
and then the airplanes. I'm like, I really kept waiting for the camera to pan over When Harry Met Sally style to an old woman on the airplane who was going to go, I'll have what she's having.
Right. So ridiculous. But let me ask you this: did you have to rewind back for the hand job up against a tree in Scotland?
That's how the episode started.
Yeah.
Go take your little sister. Yeah. So okay. So now let me just make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yes,
so the
go ahead.
episode starts. They're in the 1600s in Scotland.
Donelaith, Scotland, 1681.
So my first thought is, okay, I like this. I'm a huge Scotland guy. Athena and I watch Outlander. We're planning a big Scottish vacation in a couple years. I was like,
cool.
I could do, okay, this show is going to jump back in time to Scotland. I like it. And then the mom's like, all right, take your sister, go out. All right, sister, go over there and read off the names of the plants that we picked so that I can go jerk off this farmer behind the tree. and then that was it, right? Was there anything else in Scotland?
Right. That's what I'm wondering, Danny, is what is the significance of that scene? Because the only other thing that happens in that scene
is
birds,
right?
She's jerking off the guy and she looks up and the birds are flying. And it's like she's being judged by birds, I guess. That's it.
If you accidentally skipped ahead, we are reviewing Mayfair Witches on AMC, part of the Anne Rice's Immortal Universe. We are not discussing what we have been watching on a variety of other websites.
Yes.
Okay, this is all stuff that happened in Anne Rice's Mayfair Witches on AMC.
Yes.
Because that when the episode started, I swear my first thought was, okay, 1600s Scotland, we're going to see the origin of the Mayfair Witches. And then the guy comes out from behind the tree and I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? Okay.
It's not Lasher.
And then we're just back in New Orleans and
Very
I'm like,
weird.
okay, so is every episode going to start with a 17th century, softcore scene?
I hope so.
Yeah,
and that's how I keep coming back
on the Mayfair Witches in 1812 in Ireland.
But you know what? Hey, don't make me wait. Right? No, but like, here's the thing: the show, it's just kind of inherently goofy, and I think it's the way that they're going with it. It's.
I feel like I would really. I feel like I'd be a lot more lenient to this show if we didn't watch Interview with a Vampire. I think that's really what it comes down to for me, is that we watched, I mean, Athena watched Interview with a Vampire with me, loved every minute of it. The two leads on that show were incredible. Yeah. And I, like, when it ended, I couldn't wait for there to be like a season 2. And I was really excited about this show because it was the same universe, right? but I, I just feel like everything that made Interview with a Vampire great, this show is lacking on so far. It
Yes.
doesn't have the compelling lead performances like a Louis, like a Lestat, even Daniel, the author. They don't have a character that you just want to grasp onto. They have these characters that are in the peripheral or the periphery, not the peripheral. Who might be interesting. Like I said last time, I know the name of the character of Lasher because my dad had the Anne Rice book Lasher. So
Right.
maybe a show about Lasher would have been more interesting. But in this show, he's just some creepy, I don't even know what he is. He's like a spirit or something that people can see, and apparently he can have sex. And he could possess certain women in this family, but we're 2 episodes into a show about witches, and they're severely lacking on the witchcraft so far. And I kind of feel like it's time to get to the witchcraft stuff, or witch or get off the pot.
Nice. Well, okay. So going back to what you said about Interview with the Vampire, there are many characters that come and go throughout the show, but the hyper focus is on Lestat, Louis, and their daughter Claudia, right?
Claudia.
And then of course you have the interviewer and Louis in the present day too, and then eventually, spoiler, Armand is there too. But for the most part, it's really just Lestat and Louis and Claudia. This show so far has this hyper focus on Rowan and then her mother and Lasher, and then this Cyprian, right? With little glimpses of other characters, but I'd have to say that none of them are really compelling, just like you just said.
And it's very, and not to bring up the peripheral, but one of our complaints with the peripheral was there were too many characters that the show kept jumping back and forth to. And on their own, there's some really interesting things about these characters, but you never stay with them long enough. So there's this doctor who shows up to take care of Annabeth Gish's character, Deidre, who's been in a lifelong coma.
Yeah.
And when you first meet him, you feel like he's he's being sent there by the state to take care of this woman who's in a vegetative state.
Right.
And you learn very quickly that there's something odd about him. He refuses to give her the medicine because he wants her to snap out of it and wake up. So is he there because of Lasher? Is he there because of the witches and they want, or we see him a little bit more in this episode. He fakes giving her the medicine to make it look like, she's still underneath, but he's like, you're going to wake up. You're going to wake up. And okay, great. Now she woke up. And by the end of the episode, she's dead. So that's 2 episodes now where we've met this character. We're left to try to put together what his motivations are. And the character that he was directly involved with is just dead. So, okay, are we going to come back to this later on? Also the character of Cyprian has done nothing so far. He's lurked. He's lurked in the background, and he's had one scene where he meets Alexandra Daddario's character, Rowan, and he's immediately knocked out. And so it's so you have a bunch of these characters who effectively just lurk in the background.
Yeah.
Asking to be interesting, and then they're just off the screen for a while. Yeah. I kind of felt that, Cyprian and Rowan were going to form this kind of partnership. I'm going to tell you who you are. There's going to be a big exposition dump about your birth and your mother. Maybe we'll get some cool flashback stuff. And so far, again, we're 2 hours plus into this show, which is probably 8 episodes? If it Interview with a Vampire was 7.
I think so, it's 8, yeah.
Yeah, so we're a quarter of the way through the show, and the only interesting thing that's happened really so far is there's, the mom got her throat cut in the elevator. And also, and all right, and this is where, and we always make this joke that Interview with a Vampire had sex scenes in it.
Yeah.
And Interview with a Vampire had some like real hardcore stuff in there. There's at least one scene in that where I was like, how did that not get like a rated R?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like this show is like, and I feel like Anne Rice's material lends itself to be more sexual.
Yes.
Like the whole idea of, these supernatural characters, vampires, witches, whatever Lasher is, everyone is horny all the time. I mean, I'm just being realistic. I mean, look, Alexandria Rowan character, episode 1, she has a hookup with the guy, with the bartender. She's putting down advances from that other guy. In this episode, we have, a prolonged sex scene again. I feel like the sex scenes are, with the exception of the noise, they're very PG level. Whereas Interview with a Vampire, the scenes were much more, they were turned up again to 11 almost. Right. And I feel like that's not doing this show any service to have a show that is trying to embrace the sexual side of Anne Rice's work, but it's also trying to, get away with, let's show some naughty stuff on, television. Like, I feel like if this was on HBO, we'd be complaining there was too much nudity. It's almost like the opposite. That was like did you and Sherry watch True Blood?
A couple seasons, yeah.
Yeah,
like 4 seasons.
There were points of True Blood where I literally was just like, I can't do this. This is just ridiculous. Like, at this point, what are we even doing? It was too much.
Sure.
And I'm not saying there needs to be like porn but there is a happy medium that could be found. And, this show to me is too PG when it wants to be rated R. Yeah. Whereas Interview with a Vampire was clinging to, anything to not be like, blurred off television. I don't need True Blood, but I feel like this show is kind of, it just doesn't, it's not fully embracing what it wants to be.
Sure. Yeah, Anne Rice's writing in itself is inherently erotic, and Anne Rice has written erotica in her career. So she's very good at detailing sensual things, and her stuff is better suited for HBO, something like that. One thing that is interesting about this show and about that scene that we keep talking about in depth, that airplane scene, is that essentially you have a spirit having sex with the mother, and the daughter is also having an orgasm, just sort of like vicariously through the mother. And I think that in itself is really sort of taboo and dark and interesting. One thing that this show kind of hints at or goes towards, but then it just sort of gets mired down in sort of like the plot and just being like a typical show, is that this is a line of women that have all kind of shared this spirit. Lasher has been like a lover for these women, and he like kind of corrupts them, or he has some kind of hold on them. And I think that that's a really interesting idea of like, this guy is the lover of the mother, but now he's interested in the daughter. And we even see a scene later on in the episode where the mother is going into a trance. She is doing witchcraft of a type to like see where her daughter is. And she sends Lasher to go look to find her. And Lasher sees her taking a shower, which once again, it has that kind of softcore kind of vibe where it's like, oh, Alexandra Daddario is in the shower. Oh, it's hot, right? But then like he goes to go touch her and the mom says, stop, right? Or don't.
So do you think, now I don't know, because you've listened to part of the book, and I know Sherry's read the books.
Yes.
So are we led to believe that like Lasher has moved on from the mom, wants Alex Rowan now, and he's the one that murdered her in the elevator?
So I have not gone up to the point where the mom is in the elevator, if that even happens in the book. But because the elevator, the floors all go as if it doesn't stop, like it just goes as if all the floors are going through, right? I would assume that it's a supernatural thing that kills her. And I would assume that it is Lasher that kills her, and that
Okay.
he's interested in Rowan. One thing that has been missing from the show, or at least they kind of gave us blue balls about this, was when they showed us that Scotland scene. You have the scene where essentially the girl's going to go jerk off a guy by a tree, and then that's it. But Sherry was telling me that the book goes into detail about all these like past lives of these witches, and that's why the book is 50
1,000.
hours as an audiobook. It's because
Yeah.
you're doing these lives. And so I don't really understand why they did that sequence. The only logic I could have is to show that maybe they're implying that these women are like inherently sexual, or they are often seen as sexual items, and that the thing with the birds, like the birds are like a sign or an omen. That's the only thing I could get out of that scene.
I think that's a very, if you're going to make a time jump to show us like a flashback to something,
Yeah,
there's better ways to do it, than to do just of all the scenes, just to show that one.
right. It's
Yeah.
so random and so short. It's like, what is the point? So that's what I'm thinking might be the case. So when they did have that scene on the airplane, I was like, okay, this is over the top, and it's kind of weird that it's the mother and the daughter. And also, honestly, I was just thrown off because Annabeth Gish with those contact lenses, she's sitting there all like turned on and stuff, and I'm like, oh, I hate looking at her eyes, right? But that in itself is an interesting thing, and that's the more taboo thing of Interview with the Vampire. Like the Interview with the Vampire book came out in the 70s, and so having characters that are like homosexual in the 70s, that's like super taboo for its time.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it, and honestly, even having two male vampires that are gay in the present day in 2022, 2023, that is still kind of taboo to have that on television. It's not wholly accepted. It's way more accepted than it was in the 70s, but it's still this kind of this edgy thing. And in the show, I think, like you said, it's like they kind of need to embrace that a little bit more. They're not this like, honestly, what a lot of this feels like is we're just kind of hitting plot beats and we're focusing on the plot.
Yeah.
Whereas really we should be focusing on the characters and making the characters more interesting and drawing out the taboo more.
Yeah.
Well, so are we on board?
Hopefully next episode we lean more positively and we start to get a more complete episode.
Yeah. This episode was entitled The Dark Place. Do you think that is in reference to the tunnels that Rowan kind of travels through when she's using her power?
It could be. It could be the I thought it might have been in reference to the state that Annabeth Gish was like stuck in for years.
Okay.
Before she was like, but again, I'm not 100% sure. It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing. Oh, go ahead. I want to say that there is one difference from the book, and I think this might be a good example too. I'm pretty sure that Cyprian is this character Michael in the book, and maybe they just changed his name for the show. But there's a character in the book who he dies, but he's brought back to life. And when he comes back to life, he can touch things, and he gets visions of things when he touches them, kind of like in the Dead Zone, right? And that's what Cyprian on the show has. And so I'm thinking that Cyprian is this character, Michael. Now, the thing is that they go throughout Michael's entire fucking life from when he is like a little boy up until he's like a middle-aged man. And like, it just goes into great detail about his life and lovers that he's had. And he had to get like an abortion with this one woman at one point. And so it's like, that's so adult and realistic. And the way that Anne Rice describes it, it feels like you're really reading a person's fucking life, like a real existing human. And like on the show, he's just this like goofy character that goes into her boat or whatever and touches things and has visions, So I don't know if there's going to be like an episode that's like devoted to his origin or not. I'm guessing probably not. But the show just seems to be focused on plot points and not really character history or depth.
No, I'd be very curious if there's anybody out here who really, really enjoys this show or has really enjoyed these first two episodes. If you've read the book and if you're loving what you are watching so far, let us know in the comments. Tell us, what are we missing? Why should we, like, we're going to keep watching. We're going to keep giving it a chance. We do not, our goal is to never come on and totally berate a show. In fact, most of the time, if we don't like something, we will probably either stop covering it or just decide, you know what, let's just not do these. But I think that the issue for us is, we loved Interview with a Vampire, which establishes that this is a shared universe. We like the author of the material. We like, you know, and I think we both see where there is potential for a good horror themed show in here. It's just that 2 episodes in, we haven't gotten a complete episode yet. So I'm hoping that'll be episode 3 next week, and that next week when we meet on a Monday night or a Tuesday night, we're much more positive. What I am positive about is the next time that we meet, which is going to be tomorrow night, to do our top 10 of 2022. I have to go through this list of 75 friggin' horror movies that I watched last year.
Yes.
These are all 2022 movies, by the way. This is not like I watched 75 horror movies. No, these are all from last friggin' year.
Wow.
So kudos to Shudder for probably half of these were Shudder exclusives, or movies that Shudder put out there. Kudos to Screenbox TV, which I got a subscription of. Another thing I won at a horror trivia contest, which allowed me to pick up and watch a couple more. And just 2022 was such a great freaking year for horror. If you want to hear my quick thoughts on some of 2023's earliest horror releases, I put out a short video yesterday. It's 58 seconds long. I give you my very quick thoughts on Skinamarink, which is in a very limited theatrical release now and will be on Shudder very soon. And then also Sick, a new horror movie, a new slasher, co-written by Kevin Williamson, which is on Peacock now. So streaming free. Both of the movies are getting a lot of positive feedback on the social media machine. I am not as positive about both of the movies, but I do think that they're both worth watching, and probably not the kind of movies that will make my top 10 list of 2023, but certainly if these are the January releases, along with Megan, which Charlotte and I have a review of that up on our channel. It's very rare to get good January releases in horror. And we've gotten Megan, Skinamarink, and Sick, which, again, I'm not going out there and telling you these are the best 3 horror movies, that these will be the best 3 horror movies of the year, but they're all fun. At least some of them are fun. They're worth seeing. They're all worth seeing for different reasons. They're all very different kinds of movies. So it's a good start to the year.
Yeah, well put, man. I'm actually would like to see all 3 of those. I'm looking forward to seeing Skinamarink when it hits Shudder. But I'm really looking forward to talking about our list. I've seen probably a third of the horror movies that you've seen from 2022, but it was easy for me to make my top 10 because I really loved 10 of these films. So, and a lot of foreign films on my list too. You'll see.
Good. I was gonna say, I was like, that's where I think our lists might diverge, because I as usual, I have a lot of foreign films, at least 3 I could think of that are almost 100% sure to make my list.
Nice.
But it was just such a great year, because at the same time you had, and we'll talk more about this when we actually do our list, but like, you had these big studio releases, you had franchise movies, like, you know, you had a Halloween movie, you had a Scream movie, you had a Texas Chainsaw movie, a Hellraiser movie, a Predator movie, like all in the same freaking year. You had another series of Chucky on TV. So it's like all of the characters, all of the franchise characters that you love in horror were back. And then there was a ton of great original horror as well. And as you just said, as usual, a ton of great foreign horror. So you got to weed through a bunch of it and come up with a top 10 list. I'm pretty sure I know what my numbers 1 through 5 are going to be. It's really kind of figuring out the order of 6 through 10 and figuring out those first 5 movies that are going to get cut, like 15 to 11. that are
Yeah.
not going to make the list.
Nice. Yeah, so I will edit that video after we record tomorrow night, Tuesday, and the video will be up by next Monday. But we are
Awesome.
going to continue to do our Mayfair Witches reviews. Like Danny said, if you guys are into the show, please let us know. Make sure that you subscribe to the Lastercast. I'm actually very curious if you've read the book, The Witching Hour, and if you watch the show. What do you think about this adaptation? But until next Tuesday, when we're jerking off by a tree,